Hello, everyone. Welcome. Tonight it is 6:30 Pacific time, and we're here in Los Angeles at the Activist Artists headquarters, and welcome from wherever you are tuning in. And I want to start by thanking Bernie and Jamie and the entire Activist team. Thank you to our host committee that's brought us all here together tonight and for rallying strong. And thank you to our incredible guest speakers who you will be hearing from very shortly. And tonight we will be hearing from activists and artists who have been at the front lines of this work. And we also have an opportunity tonight to join them, to join these ranks, because this race, the race to get a new district attorney into LA, which is in charge of the largest prison system in the nation, this is going to take all of us. So we will be hearing from experts and leaders, but the real invitation tonight is to get engaged and to find where you can join this force, because that's really what it's going to take to win in November. And we have a very rare opportunity in this, because George Gacón is a one-of-a-kind leader and candidate. So while national politics might be spiraling out of control, we have an opportunity to affect real change tonight. And to get us started off, we're going to hear from Matthew Rising. And Matt is going to share some background on George. And he's been one of the earliest supporters in this race. Matt's an attorney, an entrepreneur, and an advocate, and will tell us about George's personal and professional record. Thank you.
Hey there. My name is Matt Rising. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Ariel, Jamie, Bernie Cahill, and the activist team for all your effort in setting up this event and for your support of George Gacón. It's my honor to help start the evening by providing some background on George Gacón's personal and professional life. George's story begins in Cuba, where he was born. George's family immigrated to America when George was 13, with nothing more than the clothes on their backs and a cardboard suitcase. They settled in Los Angeles, and after dropping out of high school to work, George joined the Army when he turned 18, quickly becoming the youngest sergeant in his brigade. While serving, he earned his high school diploma and college degree from Long Beach State before going to work for the LAPD. George worked his way up through the ranks of the LAPD from a patrol officer who took law school night classes to assistant chief of police under Bill Bratton, overseeing operations for the entire 9,000 officer department. In 2006, he was hired to be the chief of the Mesa Police Department in Arizona, where he famously took on Sheriff Joe Arpaio and anti-immigration groups. George was then appointed by Gavin Newsom to be San Francisco's chief of police. After reducing crime, he was appointed to be San Francisco district attorney in 2011. As district attorney in San Francisco, George earned a national reputation as a visionary in criminal justice reform. Motivated by the values of fairness, public safety, and service, George has used innovative data-driven tools and a comprehensive and humane approach to increase trust and reduce incarceration, while also reducing violent crime to near record lows in San Francisco. Now, George is running for LA County District Attorney to bring those same results to the place he came of age. Diving deeper into his track record, George has written or supported almost every California criminal justice reform measure in the past 10 years. Additionally, the diversionary programs Gacón implemented that keep kids out of criminal justice system are being duplicated around the nation. He started a national movement when he proactively cleared eligible marijuana convictions after legalization. He was the first elected DA in the nation to call for an end to money bail and pioneered the use of artificial intelligence to keep race information out of the police reports that prosecutors review when making charging decisions to reduce the threat of implicit bias. He was also a co-author of Proposition 47, which reduced simple possession for personal use from a felony to a misdemeanor, to roll back California's involvement in the war on drugs. Since its passage, property crime is down, recidivism is down, and racial disparities are down. That initiative also saves California hundreds of millions of dollars every year that's being redirected to victim services, education, and mental health and substance abuse. As you can hear, George Gacón has dedicated his life to making our society safer and more just. He has the experience, vision, and skills to give Los Angeles' criminal justice system the reform it so desperately needs. I hope you enjoy the rest of tonight's programming. Next up, we will see a video of George explaining his candidacy in his own words. Now is the time to lean in, donate, communicate, and vote. Thank you.
You know, I want you to think for a moment that you're going into an automobile dealership to buy a car. And the salesperson comes to you and she tells you that this car that you're looking at is likely to fail 70% of the time. How many of you would buy that car? But yet, we do this every day in our justice system.
Reality is that under Jackie Lacey and under the policies that have been followed in this county, we're not safer. If locking people up worked, LA County would be the safest county in the world, okay? But we're not.
Reform is always going to be uncomfortable for the status quo. Whether you're in the business of building private prisons, whether you're in the bail business, whether you're in the business of enlarging the size of a police agency, reform is going to be uncomfortable. There is no question that the current law is a problem. But I have been the only district attorney in the state that have been public in supporting Dr. Weber's bill 2 years ago to ensure that the force that the police officers use on duty has to be the minimum necessary force and that they have to evaluate other alternatives. Ms. Lacey has been against that, as every other DA. The distinction here is that you have a district attorney that is comfortable looking the other way, and she was just given a million reasons to continue to look the other way by the LAPPL. That's what we have here, and that's what we as a public and as a community have to look at.
Reform is a journey, it's not a destination, so I would never just simply sit here comfortably saying, well, we're just going to do what we did before. Yeah. No, we're going to do that, and we're going to continue in the journey because reform and community safety actually travel together.
Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Genevieve Jones-Wright. In 2017, Genevieve ran for San Diego County District Attorney, where she offered the cure for our failing system: more care, compassion, and concern. Tonight, she's going to provide us with some background on the importance of the role of District Attorney in our society. Welcome, Genevieve.
Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here tonight in support of George Gacón. My name is Genevieve Jones-Wright. And again, it is my pleasure to be here on behalf of my dear friend, George Gacón, running to make change in LA County. The district attorney is the most powerful person in the criminal legal system and has an incredible amount of authority and discretion. A district attorney makes decisions about who and what to charge, what cases to divert, if at all, and what reforms, if any, to implement. We've seen plenty of examples where progressive district attorneys like Chesa Boudin chose to no longer seek cash bail or no longer prosecute certain low-level offenses like Larry Krasner, or to divert people struggling with mental illness. We've seen progressive DAs vow to never seek the discriminatory and failed death penalty and close down juvenile halls, like George Gacón. A district attorney should never forfeit rights for convictions. A district attorney must understand that every single person has the right to a fair trial and equal justice under the law. A district attorney must hold everyone accountable under the law, and that includes those who wear a badge. And a district attorney must understand that there are no exceptions to these rules. The criminal legal system in Los Angeles, as it now stands, lacks balance. Los Angeles has the largest jail system in the world, with nearly 17,000 people incarcerated on any given day. By comparison, New York City holds less than 7,000 people in jail. The human toll of Los Angeles's system of mass incarceration is catastrophic. It's also terribly expensive. Los Angeles spends over $1 billion every single year to keep people locked in cages. This is money that could be used to address the root causes of many crimes. This money could greatly help in reducing poverty and solving the lack of mental health services and treatment for substance use disorder, which go unaddressed or are made worse through incarceration. Investing in these services and moving away from a system of mass incarceration is the only way to break the cycle and truly make our communities safer and prosperous for all. As long as we keep thinking we can arrest and jail our way out of our problems, we won't make our communities safer. This thinking will continue to waste taxpayer dollars by cycling the same people through the system over and over again, or worse, warehousing people permanently in our prisons, all because this thinking will never get to the root causes of recidivism. Throughout our history, prosecutors have measured success in arrests and convictions. They've made a huge mistake that has come at a massive human cost. The true measure of success in criminal justice should be how many people we keep from entering the system in the first place, and how many people we restore to keep them from returning to it. I'm asking the voters of Los Angeles County to reimagine the criminal legal system with all of us, to change it into a system focused more on healing and prevention than punishment and retribution, to prevent the harm that is caused by separating families and the public health crisis that is mass incarceration, to work together across communities to increase public safety without sacrificing our constitutional rights. Now is the time for change. The status quo, as exemplified by Jackie Lacey, is failing all of us. We can no longer sit back while our so-called leaders recycle old ideas that have left us all unsafe. The old way of thinking has not made our communities safer. We need creativity and not conventional wisdom. We need leadership and not laziness. We need advocacy and not apathy. We need a criminal legal system that will actually be a criminal justice system that works for everyone. We need George Gacón for LA County.
Genevieve, thank you so much. Absolutely to every single word that you shared. And thank you for backing George. And if you run for DA again, we'll back you too. So next, we're going to hear from an artist and activist by the name of Noah Macbeth, also known as Nambe. And he's originally from Heidelberg, Germany, but he came over to the US when he was 18 years old. And he has, since his last album in 2018, he's accumulated over 300 million streams and is just touching a chord with young people. But what really struck a chord with me was a few months ago seeing a post on a mutual friend's page talking about a run-in that Nambe had with the LAPD. And I think that really invigorated him and got him more involved. And I just want you to hear from him because it's a story that needs to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel, and everybody else for putting this together and having me on. You know, this whole story is very, very personal to me. I've had a mother that was in prison. I have cousins that are in prison for life, and you know, this story that I'm about to tell is not just my own story, and it is all too common. About 4 days before George Floyd got murdered, I was on my way to getting food in Hollywood, where I live, and there's nothing unusual about that. And on my way back, I was pulled over by a few officers, and I was not given a reason why I was being pulled over. Instead, I was accused of being on a drug run and was asked if I'm copying drugs. They were very dismissive, very rude in their tone, very intimidating. And that's when I realized that wasn't a regular traffic stop, you know, things that we're all used to every now and then. But they immediately came to the car with their guns drawn. That was the first time I ever had a gun pulled on me, so I got very alarmed at that point. You know, they said things like, what are you doing out here? Are you trying to cop? And I told them I was getting food. I showed them the receipt, and they were very condescending, saying they don't believe me. And they asked me for my ID. I showed them my ID. At that point, they flicked it back in my face and told me to get the F out of the car. I was put in handcuffs. I was searched. My car was illegally searched while I was put in the back of the cop car. They completely trashed my car, took all the paperwork out, emptied my wallet. Everything was scattered across the car. At this point, I was never given a reason why I was pulled over in the first place. Another officer pulled up. And after some time, they were like, get out of here. And I can't explain like how scared a person is in that moment. Like, I'm usually not a frightened person or a timid person in my everyday life, but I really, after all the recent news, I really thought that was it, because there was no reason, and everything was very chaotic and very fast. And again, like, I have a history of, you know, my family, you know, my mom going to prison, and many people in my family, that, you know, there is a certain distrust, but, you know, I chose music. I like to think I'm a law-abiding citizen, and but I am aware of how destructive the prison industrial complex is to our communities, and why we need someone like George Gacón. Like, it is the first time I've really seen someone say the things he says who's on the inside, you know. And it does matter that he is a white person, because it can't just be us saying these things all the time. And to know somebody is on our side who actually has fought this fight for a long period of time, who comes from law enforcement, is very, very important. Lastly, I'll say this, and then I'll get off, I promise. But 4 days after that, George Floyd was murdered. The protest started, all this stuff, and there were a few protesters who had let stay at my music studio because they were stuck because of the curfew at the time. It was very chaotic in LA. There was like a curfew for people to be home after 6 o'clock. And they couldn't go home, so I let them stay. And long story short, the fact that I let them stay at the music studio ended up to me getting evicted from my music studio that I've operated for 7 years. And so what I'm saying is, we have a system right now that rewards people that operate without integrity, and that's what needs to change. I think we know what is right, you know, and there is no room for negligence. And I hope that George Gacón will take the right steps into the right direction. I have full faith that he will. That's all I have. Thank you.
We founded Black Lives Matter to stop the violence inflicted on our communities by the people who are supposed to protect us. Jackie Lacey has been against every single reform that our movement has called for. That's because police unions have spent millions helping her get elected. And in exchange, Lacey shields bad cops from accountability. Jackie Lacey's on the wrong side of justice.
So Jackie Lacey is on the wrong side of justice, but I think all of us have had enough of bad news, and we have a candidate in George who is on the right side of justice. And I want to thank Nambe for your share right before we heard from Patrice Cullors. Thank you for showing up, and thank you for your share. And I think we all know why we're here tonight, not only to raise awareness, to get educated, hopefully to get so inspired that we go out and share this with all our friends, but to raise funds, because elections, and especially local elections, really do come to donations from real humans. And so tonight, we're inviting you to connect. We have an opportunity, I should say, we have an opportunity to connect even deeper to our humanity, because the issues on the table should unite all of us. Because regardless of whether you're red, blue, or polka dot, there are matters at hand that unite all of us. Because we're here tonight because we all want safer neighborhoods. We all want a more equitable justice system. We all want decent, diligent, trustable leaders in position of power. And we all want our children to be safe and not to be terrorized by those meant to protect them. So tonight, if we can focus on banding together and giving generously and continuing to support Gacón all the way to November, we have an opportunity for tangible change, and that is exciting. And I want to let you know that we've already raised over $7,000 thus far tonight, which is really exciting. Our team had said, let's just have a small goal of $20,000 tonight, but you guys, we're already at $7,000. So I'm confident that we might be able to even blast past that goal. So let's have it happen in real time. The donation link should be pretty obvious under the stream. So like, get in there right now, don't stop. Let's have the momentum driving and happening right now. And on that note of connecting to our humanity, I'm very, very excited to introduce our next speaker, who one of his most popular memes and sayings is "stay human," which is what this is all about. And it's Michael Franti. He is a humanitarian, a globally recognized activist, artist, filmmaker. And actually, I'm going to share a little personal story. In 2001, right after 9/11, it was maybe a week after 9/11, and everyone was just in a very dark space. And Michael, you played a show at the Ogden Theater, and there was just a dark cloud over everyone. And you had this remarkable ability to let us connect with our hearts, but then you brought us through that darkness back into our joy and back into our humanity and connection. You had 1,000 people jumping up and down for joy by the end of the night. So thank you for being here today, and welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Ariel. It's great to be here in support of George. And I just want to invite everybody right now, if you're watching on YouTube, look for the link right there and donate. You know, I live in San Francisco in a neighborhood called Hunters Point, where we have what they list in the real estate records as intense urban activity. So there's over policing in the streets. Our neighborhood's been decimated by mass incarceration over the decades. And Chesa Bodine, who is the current DA of San Francisco, is very progressive. He actually replaced George Gacón there. He won by just a few hundred votes in a runoff. And the reason I want to share that with you is because this election with Jackie Lacey is not going to be an easy race. She's outspent, or George is outspent by the police union, and we have got to do everything we can to rally with the sense of optimism. I have a similar story about my life that Nambe had. You know, one day I was just driving through our neighborhood. I was pulled over by 7 police cars. I was handcuffed. My son, who was teenagers in the seat next to me, they pulled him out, put him on the sidewalk, hands behind his back. I was handcuffed, put in the back of a police car, and accused of a double homicide. And if it wasn't for the fact that there was somebody there who was recording, who was walking their dog, who was a fan of my music, who started shouting my name, Michael, Michael, you okay? You okay? I could have been, in prison for just on trumped up charges. And this is something that happens every day. So for every person that we see on the news every night that is beaten by police or killed by police, we have people who are every day in these situations where over-policing changes their lives in those moments. The single greatest factor in creating stability and bringing down crime and increasing safety in communities is making sure that families can stay together. And what mass incarceration does is it takes families and separates them, separates mothers and fathers and teenagers from their family structure. And when we have families that stay together, they thrive. And that is why I am so supportive of George, because that's what he was doing in San Francisco. But also, as the state of California goes, so does the rest of the United States. And LA is the single largest prosecutorial district in the country. And if we can set this new tone in both LA and in San Francisco with these progressive DAs, we can show the rest of the country that it works and that we can create just a shift in the thinking away from mass incarceration, get people who have had petty drug offenses auto expunged for their marijuana offenses, which is something that George has been in support of, get rid of the death penalty, which is crazy that we're even doing it in 2020, especially with the injustice and the way that charges are trumped up for people. And I want to just share a song of optimism with you, because the single most reason why you should vote for George is because we need good news. We need good news. With the total shit show that we see taking place politically in our country right now, we need reasons to get excited and people to rally behind. And George is one of those people. So this is a tune I just want to sing for you all as I just sign out and say thank you for being here. And please donate and vote. Every day I wake up and turn my phone on. I read the news of the day just as it's coming down. I do my best not to let it get me down. I try to keep my head up, but this is Babylon. This world's in crisis, we try to fight it, this changing climate. With scientists and with politicians divided by it. So many ways we can solve it, but they will never sign it. This mountain's tumbling down, but still we try to climb it. It's in the Torah, Quran, and in the Bible. Love is the message, but somehow we turn to rivals. It's come to people always picking up their rifles. Another school getting shot up homicidal. Some people trying to look fly, some people trying to get high. Some people losing their minds, some people trying to get by. When you look in my eyes, you see the sign of the time. We are looking for the same thing. But what if this song was number one? Would it mean that love had won? Would it mean that the world was saved and no guns are being drawn today? What if everybody had a job and nobody had to break a law? What if everyone could say, yeah, yeah, that it's good to be alive today? Yeah. Oh. Yes, it's good to be alive today. Yeah. If you're at home, I want you to put your hands together. That it's good to be alive today. Yeah. Oh. Yes, it's good to be alive today. Yeah. No matter what nobody say, people used to feel safer when they would hear a siren, like help is on its way, but now they only think of violence and other youth in the streets and police is in a conflict. And now we hear the guns click. Yo, corona crisis and ISIS is taking heads off. A drone was bombing the village and now the kids all signing up to be soldiers, but they are willing now to do the killing now. But are you willing now? Some people out there, they're trying to make some problems. They're trying to tell the people that they can solve them with TV shows and sound bites and quotes. But everybody knows that it's all about the cash flow. They're telling you and me we're making progress, but tell it to the millions who are jobless. It's like a players club with billions of dollars. To get the votes, you got to make it rain in Congress. Some people trying to look fly, some people trying to get high, some people losing their minds, some people trying to get by. When you look in my eyes, you see the sign of the times, that we all looking for the same thing, yeah. But what if this song was number one? Would it mean that love had won? Would it mean that the world was saved and no guns are being shot today? What if everybody had a job and nobody had to break a law? What if everyone could say, yeah, that it's good to be alive today? Yeah. We gonna vote. It's good to be alive today. Yeah. Gonna bring in George Gascon. That it's good to be alive today. Yeah. Gonna make that change, and it's good to be alive today. Yeah. Let me hear you sing this with me at home, y'all. You say, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day we all will say that it's good to be alive today. Let's get George elected and DAs all across the country who are progressive, and let's end mass incarceration. Peace.
Please, can we encore? Is that possible? Michael, thank you so, so much. And you guys, this is exciting. While Michael was playing his incredible music and rallying us, we just raised another $5,000. So can we do that in the next 5-minute segment? Can we raise another $5,000? Because tonight is the night. Let's do it. There's no waiting anymore. We are the humans that can make this possible and get George in. So now we're going to have, I'm really excited about the panel we're about to have, and I'm going to introduce our moderator, Eliza Orleans, and then she will introduce you to our speakers. Eliza joined at the 11th hour. Thank you so much. And Eliza is a candidate for Manhattan District Attorney right now. And she's a public defender and outspoken advocate for New York City's most vulnerable. And she and George and a few others are known as reformers in the country, which is pretty exciting. And for more than a decade, she has fought in the courtroom representing over 3,000 New Yorkers who otherwise would not have been able to afford a lawyer. So Eliza, thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks for having me. This couldn't be more important. I'm so glad that we're doing this. As a candidate, I can tell you there's nothing more important than the outcome of these DA races across the country. And this is the biggest way we can make an impact on so many people's lives. And so it is so, so critical. Thank you everyone for being here, and your financial contributions will take George over the finish line and he'll win. And I'm so excited to be here, to be moderating this panel. And so I want to introduce you to our two wonderful panelists, Todd Rubenstein and Prophet Walker. Prophet is the co-founder and CEO of Treehouse, a community-based co-living organization. Prophet's early experiences in South LA amidst poverty, violence, and homelessness led him become deeply involved in the criminal justice and education reform. And while managing and operating Treehouse, he also holds positions on multiple nonprofit and civic boards. Now, Todd started his legal career in 1993 as deputy district attorney in Los Angeles County. And he's now managing partner of Morris Yorn, where he has represented authors, actors, writers, directors in film and television for the past 20 years. He is a founding board member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, a teacher with Inside Out Writers, and a strong advocate for criminal justice reform. So thank you both so much for being here. I'm so happy to share this panel with you.
Thank you for having us.
So I think, we're all here for George. So I want to start out to talking about George. Where did you first meet him, first hear about his candidacy, and why is it that you're supporting him?
Want to jump in there, Todd?
Go ahead, Prophet.
All right. All good. So I actually, you began to mention this prior to running a company and all this good stuff. I was actually formerly incarcerated. And I met George during my own campaign. I was running for the California State Assembly at one point. And I remember going to San Francisco and just sharing to different people as to why I was running. And George and I met. And he was the district attorney at that time. And I thought it was pretty courageous that he instantaneously endorsed me and said, this is exactly what we need in our state, and I want to support you. And so that for me made it very clear that anything connected to justice reform and really thinking about our system for humans, he was fully committed to. And I've been friends with him now for the last 7 years or so.
Amazing. Todd, how about you?
I'm going to start from my background. And, I think that I have a little bit of a unique perspective in that I was a district attorney in the LA office during the mid-90s at the height of the building of mass incarceration. We had 3 strikes and mandatory minimums, and it was incredibly vengeful laws and just locking up a lot of people. The culture in that DA's office in Los Angeles, it's very insular, and it's almost quasi-militaristic, and there is a very us versus them kind of perspective and mentality. And I think for real reform, it's going to require an outsider, somebody that puts people first and is interested in rehabilitation. And as somebody previously talked about, the diversion programs, which are now being prioritized, care first, keeping prison as a last alternative. So that's sort of like my framework of how I think about it. And I first got to know George through the work of ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and our policy work with the Human Rights Watch. And it was during, I believe it was SB 260 or SB 261 that George came on board and was incredibly supportive of, which was giving those convicted of felony offenses with life sentences when they were minors another chance, a chance to have at least a parole hearing. He was incredibly supportive, which at the time was almost unheard of. It was very progressive. And along the way with other policy initiatives, George was always someone we would go to who would look at it. And the word that Ms. Wright used before is he was always balanced. He was always fair. And I think that it's a product of his Cuban upbringing, his immigration. He was a sheriff. He's been in different states. He's worked in different capacities. And that's something that he brings a perspective to it and a fairness and a balance. And you're going to get a look. And he's fair. And I think that the balance is so important. And just to riff a little bit more, if you'll bear with me, the job of DA in LA, it's 1,000 lawyers. There's 11 million people in the county. It's a huge office. You're not, there's a lot of talk about law enforcement, which is the police. The DA is in charge of criminal justice, the operative word being justice. And in every situation, it requires discretion and what is the right, fair thing to do. And sometimes there are people that do break the laws and there's consequences. Those consequences should be appropriate and proportional, not punitive and vengeful and unfair. And a lot of these calls are really, really tough, and you want that to be, and there's politics on top of it. You want that to be in the hands of somebody that has perspective, that has balance, that puts people first. So I could not be more excited about the fact that George not only is running, but that he wants to do it. From where I sit, like, we should run, not walk. Like, we'd be lucky to have him, and I hope and would do everything in my power to see that he gets elected. I think he'd be incredible for Los Angeles County.
I completely agree. I think that's why all of us are here. We are all here, lucky to be supporting George. He and I were on a panel together, and everything he was saying, I was like, yes, me too. Like, totally agreeing with him. One of the things he and I talked about, and you touched a little bit on it, Todd, is law enforcement. And we hear a lot about law enforcement and their role in the prosecutors' offices and their outsized role. In fact, as someone who's running myself, I have pledged not to take a penny of police union money. And George has made that same pledge. Why is it, the question I'll pose to both of you, why is it that the police and prison guard unions and individuals are spending so much money to keep Jackie Lacey in office? And why is it that it's so important that George is not, in fact, accepting police union money? Prophet?
Yeah, so I have a bit of pretty intimate knowledge with this from my own campaign. And so, like I said, I ran for office back in 2014, 2013, and I had similar opposition. The entire the entire CCPOA, which is the Prisoner Guards Union, as well as ALADS and many others, poured tons of money into my opponent's campaign. And I contemplated that exact question a lot of, why would they be so against the reform? And I think there's two potential reasons for this. The first of which is just a matter of economics. The more prisons there are, the more prison guards have jobs. The more prisoners there are, the more prisoner guards have jobs. But I also think that, the second thought is I was invited to the State of the Union by the president for work I had done in partnership with LAPD down in Watts. And we built an entire program to look at different ways of community policing. So there were some officers that were set aside for enforcement. Some officers were set aside for engagement. And those that were dealing with most of the engagement cases, before it even got to the DA, officers were on the streets making discretion calls. And crime dropped by about 60%. The neighborhood ended up significantly safer. And I remember a resounding excitement by the LAPD officers. One of them just recently is Chief Mata Tingarides, who's now leading the entire program for the city of LA. And I remember them being particularly excited about the success of this program, but in the same exact breath, I remember officers, when we would leave a meeting or we would leave interacting with each other, they would always tell me, be safe. That was always the goodbye. It was never anything else. And it was be safe, be safe. And I think that officers have come to believe, and I think it's years long of, super predator ideology and tough on crime and these people are criminals. I think that officers have come to believe, in particular, that communities of color are fundamentally unsafe and therefore they are needed. And that is the only way to solve crime. And I remember, like every kid growing up in Watts, it was my dream for a moment, not anymore, but for a moment, to move out of Watts in South LA. And I moved to Playa Vista, and everything was safe, and I had money and all that. And there was zero police occupation in Playa Vista. And it was incredibly safe. I never locked my doors for almost 6 years, ever. And whereas in law enforcement, there was an incredible concentration on areas of poverty, and there was a huge occupation, and they believe that they're unsafe, and the community is fractured. And so I think when you have a set of officers that fundamentally are prisoner guards that need jobs to live and support their family, and you couple that with an idea that they're unsafe, then they're going to do everything possible to protect an interest that will continue to align with theirs, which is Jackie Lacey's. And I'm disappointed, frankly. I supported Jackie Lacey, and now I don't, because of her time in office.
Tell me about it. I supported Cy Vance when he first ran in 2009, and now I'm taking him on. So I get it. I get feeling disappointed by someone who promises that they're going to be a progressive prosecutor and turns out not to be that. And I think you said some really interesting things. I think, like, we basically as Americans are sold this false choice between public safety and locking people up. We're told that that's the only option, that if we want to feel safe, we must over-police and over-prosecute. And in fact, it doesn't provide the public safety that we hope for. Todd, do you have anything to add to the discussion about law enforcement and donations from police unions, why they're all behind Jackie Lacey?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all know the statistics that America has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. The prison industrial complex, it's a big money business. And, to build that, maintain that, keep that fed, it takes a lot of police, you know, and a lot of those industries have grown, and the pensions and the salaries, and, you know, there are massive budgets, and you know, the trend right now, thank God, you know, it's something that we've known for a really long time, is as it's been so well spoken of, is away from mass incarceration. So in the county of Los Angeles, we have the Department of Probation in the last couple of years started this diversion program, which is sort of the basis of defunding the police, which is an acknowledgement that law enforcement is a catch-all for problems of homelessness, mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction. And all of these sort of societal problems have fallen to the police, and they're not equipped to deal with it. So now they're sort of unpacking that and redirecting resources. So the defund the police is to better fund the departments, the agencies, the trained people that can deal with these real societal issues, to keep people out of jail, because they should receive treatment or hospitalization, or be provided resources or training and all of these other things, so that we're not just locking people up effectively for being poor, is really what it's about, sadly. So, you know, it's a threat on their livelihood. And Jackie Lacey, sadly, as I was saying before, is part of that old guard, part of that industry, part of a mentality that, you know, it's us versus them. There's bad guys and good guys, not recognizing that 98% of people that fall into the criminal justice system have suffered trauma, neglect, deprivation. And Ms. Wright said this as well. It's like, you know, if that's really what it's about, you're not going to punish this out of people. You got to love and support it out of people, or, you know, them into better stations in life. So, you know, I think that that's really, it's entrenched interests, and they're trying to protect it. And she's part of that mentality and that old system.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that what you're saying, you know, makes so much sense. I mean, our country, not just LA, not just New York, where I am, but our country has really criminalized addiction, poverty, you know, mental health issues, substance use disorder, homelessness, and so on, to the tune of, you know, 10 million arrests a year, and mass incarceration doesn't solve any of that. So, you know, that's why we all need someone like George, who is going to think about addressing the underlying issues people are facing, think about diversion, think about anti-recidivism and reentry, and, you know, accountability of law enforcement, and not just perpetuating this mass incarceration that we've seen so far. So I think we have time for one more question from me, and then I think we're going to go to some audience questions. But I think we've heard the district attorney's office get referred to as the most powerful elected office that you don't know about, because oftentimes citizens are not even aware that they elect their local DA. How would you go about, and how do you envision getting individuals, citizens, constituents, you know, your neighbors more engaged in DA races? And how can DAs and candidates communicate how crucial DA elections and these DA offices are for people's daily lives?
I will take a crack at it. That's a big one. I was hoping Todd went first. I think the best way that everyone who's watching us, including ourselves, should just talk to every single person about electing your local elected official, particularly your district attorney. I think you know, a lot of Gacón's support from celebrities and community and elected officials has been really powerful. So many of us are directly impacted by the office of the district attorney, and frankly, you know, as I thought it was really fascinating that almost instinctively during the protests for George Floyd in Los Angeles, all of this, there were so many signs that were asking to unelect Jackie Lacey, and really focused on this particular DA's race. And so I think, you know, the best way to keep people engaged is to try and bring the conversation down to a very local level in reality, which is there are mothers and fathers and grandmothers that are sitting in poor areas, to Todd's previous point, that are criminalizing poverty, And that decision rests so much with the district attorney. And I think beginning to really help inform people is probably the best way.
So true and so important. Todd?
That's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure of how to answer that in terms of how to make it. I think it's people are always interested about where the money goes, and also I think the humanity of how you're to me, I'm so uninterested and unmoved by this tough on crime thing. It's just so dehumanizing. And the people that are really on the forefront of this movement, the people like Brian Stevenson, who talk about bringing community policing, bringing the notion of love and compassion into a cooperative policing of neighborhoods and communities, and bringing people into it, making it feel more community and more collective and more for the greater good. And I know these are sort of big flowery terms, but the tough on crime thing, I think, is just it's been said, but it's we're not going to jail our way out of it. And I think it's guys honestly like Prophet Walker, who I've had the pleasure of calling a friend for many years, who look at that face, listen to him. He was like a person that would be labeled and discarded, and labeled and discarded and not considered deserving of the right to vote or any of these things. And he's if given the chance, if given the support, if seen as a person who like the singer just said, we all want the same thing, and he wants to contribute. I think it's about humanizing everybody and relating it to that. I think that's what it's really about. And again, just to give my last push, I think that I think Gacón, he talks about these things. He believes these things. He has a history of implementing these sorts of initiatives. And I also think he's a guy that in a very, very politicized environment also, I think, has the courage to make tough calls. And sometimes they're not popular. And you really need to believe that the person making these decisions has a backbone and a spine, who's going to do the right thing. And that's, at the end of the day, what this is about. It's about criminal justice. It's about justice. Hard to deliver, and you need a person in the job that's got a real spine. And again,
Totally
I don't think this is even a close call. The right guy.
No, not at all. And as someone who's represented thousands of people as a public defender, I've seen the humanity in each and every person, and I've watched as the district attorney's office treats them as case numbers, as they call them criminals, felons, inmates, bodies. It's just dehumanizing on every level. And so what we need is a district attorney, and George will be one, and then I will be one here in Manhattan, who cares about human beings, who sees the humanity in people, and who uplifts people. So I'm so grateful for both of you. We have a couple more questions that we'll do a little bit rapid fire so we can finish the panel on time. Prophet, the mayor withdrew previous support from Jackie Lacey and is now supporting George. What does it mean when leaders, prominent leaders, are in the community are doing that?
I think elected officials are merely representatives of the people that they've been sworn to serve, and I think what we're seeing is a massive sea shift, both in our sort of overall environment, as well as the constituents themselves are talking to their elected officials and saying this is what they want. So,
yeah, and I think that these are critical decisions, and George is so, as Todd said, it's not even a close call, and this is why we're here. This is why we're speaking out and supporting George, and we need everyone to do the same. So donate, whether you can donate $1, $5, $20, $100, whatever you can give, because we've got, not much time left, and George will make a huge difference in Los Angeles. So for the final question, what is the critical role that as LADA, George will be able to do to protect the communities of Los Angeles, not just from police violence, but also from having mental health issues criminalized and other, poverty and homelessness criminalized.
I'll defer to Todd first, and I'll come in at the end.
He wants to close. Okay. I think that he's stepping into a situation where, and first of all, I'd just like to have a gratitude moment for the fact that we're having this conversation, because I'll tell you, 20 years ago and 15 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago, this was a fantasy. So the fact that this is a reality is incredible. LA County is has implemented this diversion program, which is allocating resources to all the things you just mentioned: poverty, homelessness, mental illness, drug and alcohol treatment, and separating these issues out. But I think that to actually put meaning into that and enforce that and support that, I think is a huge thing. And I also think there's just by being a person of integrity who makes the tough calls, who gets in front of the people and explains them. And I think that the community, once they get a sense of his sense of duty and justice and fairness and balance, is such a critical thing. That starts to build trust and respect. And, I think that's what it's going to take to reform it. And it takes a person, it takes real leadership and somebody that believes those things and has demonstrated those things. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I echo everything Todd said. And I think the last thing is, like, COVID, if nothing else, has sort of accelerated other realities that were happening at a macro level. And I think the one of the most important is sort of the isolation that we've been feeling and the need for community and proximity. Todd mentioned Brian Stevenson, who wrote all about this and the importance of having community and proximity and knowing who the people are that you're sending away. And I think the DA sort of altruistically and tactically has a job to hire other DAs that are supporting different communities. And I think he has to Todd's point, has a role to play as an example, and holding firm and having the courage to do the right thing. If the unfortunate event of an unjust shooting happens at our doorsteps in Los Angeles, hopefully there's someone and from his history will be able to step up and do the right thing. So.
Thank you both so much for joining and for your candid answers on this panel and for your support of George. I see the numbers ticking up, so I can tell that we're raising a ton of money for George, which is so, so, so important. And I know that together we will all be able to be the grassroots difference that makes George win this election and makes for a more equitable justice system in Los Angeles. So thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you both for joining me. And let's go. Let's win.
When I met George Gacón, I saw an advocate, a change maker. He's truly progressive, and he's been behind nearly every justice reform measure in California in the past decade. Justice reform starts with George Gacón.
Hey guys, I think that last video got clipped a little short, but yes, John Legend supports George Gacón, among a lot of incredible true artists and activists. And I just wanted to let you know, we did just raise another $5,000. So we right now are $6,000 shy of our goal for the evening. And we have more stretch goals for after this event. But if you haven't already, this is the moment. Can we raise $6,000 in the next 3 minutes? That's my question. Genevieve?
I know that we can. I absolutely know we can meet our goal in the next 6 months, because today, more now than ever, we all deeply understand that elections have consequences. We know how the head of an administration or an office can wreak havoc on hundreds of thousands of people. And we don't have to look all the way to Washington, D.C. for an example of that. We are having conversations about justice all over this nation. Angelenos have been on the front line demanding justice. And we have an opportunity to bring justice to our criminal legal system. And we can't afford to let it slip away. Too many lives have been stolen and families separated at the hands of a carceral nation and by officers who murder with impunity. I cannot repeat this enough. Jackie Lacey is backed by the police officers associations. That means that she not only carries their name through an endorsement, but she is also backed by the power of their pocketbook. These are the folks who oppose criminal justice reform efforts across the state and our nation, even at the detriment of community safety, as George would say. George Gacón has refused to take any money from law enforcement agencies as he recognizes that integrity in doing the job is critical. George knows that a district attorney is supposed to represent the people. Let's put the people power behind George that he needs to get over the finish line as the victor. Let's all do our part to put George in that seat and put community safety first. You all have been showing up tonight. I'm asking you to do more. Dig a little deeper. And I'm asking you to give what you can. Every donation helps. In order to put the status quo out of business, we have to not only show up at the polls or our post office, but we must also show up by putting our money behind the person we believe in. The status quo does that very well. There's a reason they back Jackie Lacey. And there's a reason we, the people, back George. He will make a difference. He has already shown us. No false promises here. So let's really have his back by making a donation tonight and next week, and by encouraging our friends and family members and neighbors to do the same. George has been running a great race. Let us do our part. Let's go, George, and let's go people power. Now is the time.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's go, George. And thank you, Genevieve, for rallying all of us. Yes. And so tonight, they're still pouring in. Please keep donating. We're this close. I think we're about $3,000 away from reaching our goal for the night, but it doesn't stop tonight. It's now all the way to November, because the bottom line is that local elections come down to who has the budget to be on TV, and to stay on TV, and to keep telling people who might not be educated, might not know how to vote. And so a lot of times people just vote in the direction of the message they receive. So we want them to get the right message. We want them to see George's face. We want them to know to vote for George. And local elections are where the bulk of tangible change happens. So sometimes we get distracted by bigger, maybe more glamorous things on big stages and big debates. And I'm not putting that aside, but I am saying tonight we have an opportunity to back very tangible change that affects our communities and affects thousands and thousands and even millions of people. So we've had generous donors along the way. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's here right now for all your generous support. But let's keep going. Everything Genevieve was saying, it starts tonight, and then it's tonight all the way to November. So I just want to share one more time that backing a candidate like George is a rare, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it's also at a pivotal moment in our nation and in the history of criminal justice. So while so many Americans are living on the side of hate and fear right now, you have an opportunity to have your actions and your intentions line up in one solid choice. The choice to back George, the choice to do whatever you can to see him win. So thank you for showing up tonight. Please share this with your friends, because we all got to be here live, and that's awesome, but this is going to stay up there. So share this with your friends, and let's win this together. Thank you to activists. Thank you to all our incredible speakers. and artists. And thank you, Genevieve, for sharing the stage. Any final words?
Let's go with George and let's get him in that seat.
Let's go. Thank you all. Have a great night.